Hello everybody, this is Bill Purdy from Fair Winds Photography, making another video trying to simulate a little bit of the harsher conditions. And one of the harsher conditions, especially with beach portraits, is the sun. A lot of times people will say that they want the sun for good lighting, and the beach is a beautiful place because everyone's well lit. To tell you the truth, some of the hardest shoots that I've ever done has been on the beach. And there's a number of different conditions that make that very difficult. First of which, yes, it provides a lot of bright sunlight, which is great. However, that also creates a lot of squinting. I have sunglasses on right now, but even to look at the camera right now, you can see my brow is tensed up. You know, sometimes, a lot of times, especially with children, you'll get the one eye squint and the crunched up nose like this with the teeth out. That's very common for photographers who aren't very good at posing people or understanding what's happening with the light. They'll be more concerned with making sure that the people's faces are completely lit up rather than look at the expression on the people's faces and what they look like in the portrait. It's certainly not something that is frameable, and it's not something you're going to want to hang in the house when you got a bunch of people doing that. So part of that problem is the fact that shooting with the full face of full light is going to cause that squinting. And then on the flip side of that, if I were to turn to the side, how would I turn to the side so you'd be able to see it here? What you would see is a demarcation line of the sunlight coming down on this side of the face, which would be very brightly exposed, and this side of my face, which is in the shadows, would be very dark, almost black, very high contrast. So it's a very difficult situation to shoot in. The sand on the ground doesn't help either because it's very reflective, and it causes people to squint and to have very harsh light on them. There are a number of different ways to combat that. In my introductory video, we talked about my go-to portrait lens, which is the this is the Tamron 70-200 f2.8. I love to shoot f2.8. That means that my aperture is wide open, letting in a ton of light. I can use a very fast shutter, and I can use very low ISO speeds. All that equates to a very beautiful picture. But now what we're going to do is, with my assistant back here, Allison, we're going to take a few pictures of her. And you see that I have a speed light on here. At this time, that's not going to fire. I just want to take a picture of her without any sort of artificial lighting and have her, we'll take a look at what the picture looks like after I take it. So let me go ahead and take that shot. You ready, sweetie? So I just took a number of shots. My settings at this point are f2.8. I'm shooting at 1/1600th of a second at ISO 250. That's run-of-the-mill, right in the middle of the highway there, of settings for a shot like that. And you'll see, here are the pictures that I just took. And you can see through them that Allison has some funky shadows that are happening on her left side of her face. And she's got a little bit of a squint happening there. It's not too pronounced here, but we're also not on the beach with the reflections coming up from the sand and the wide open expanses. We have a little bit of trees around here which are absorbing some of the light. So what I want to do at this point is to power this flash on, and I'm going to put this into what's called TTL mode, which is through the lens. And what that does is the flash actually fires two flashes, almost imperceivably quickly. And what happens is it'll fire a first flash. It gives information to the camera. The camera makes a decision on how much power to give to the flash, and it does it sort of automatically. So that way, when the second flash goes off just a few milliseconds later, it gives out the proper amount of light in order to properly expose the subject. So I'm going to try that now, and we're going to take another shot of Allison and see what that looks like with the TTL. Okay, Scooter, you ready? Okay, I just took these two pictures, which you'll see right now, and as you can see, a little bit of those shadows have been taken out. Not a whole lot of the shadows have been taken out, but just enough so that way it makes it a little more manageable, a little less obvious that there's a high contrast shadow there, a little bit easier to correct in post-production in Photoshop and Lightroom. In my introductory video I talked about limitations of the speed lights, and where that comes into play is you saw that I walked way up to Allison knowing that I had to use the light to light her up, and the lights, you know, after a certain distance they don't provide a lot of lighting. So I should also mention that these flashes, the TTL, has like this is like an auto mode for it. It'll automatically put out the right amount of light. I do have the ability to boost that light or to cut that light through settings here with it goes by 1/3 steps, so I can increase it in small incremental steps until I'm happy with the amount of light that I'm putting out. I'm not going to mess with that now. What the pictures you just saw with the flash are what I'm going to stick with. So now here's the drawback. I want to add that creamy, soft background with no real definition to it, and in order to do that I need to zoom into her. To zoom in I need to back up. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. You ready, sweetie? So I'm already pretty far back, and I'm going to zoom in here to her. I'm at 200 millimeter. Here we go. And I just took 2 images. And here are those 2 images, and what you'll see is the fact that this flash didn't reach them. It didn't reach Allison. So while I exposed properly for her, the images I got are very similar to the first batch that I took, where there's hardly any additional lighting being added to her whatsoever. So that's a drawback, especially when I want to use this beautiful lens and I want to be able to back up and add that creamy bokeh to the background. I'm right back to the beginning again. I have some harsh shadows and I have some squinting going on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some artificial lights, and we're going to take a look and see what that looks like. So upon finishing our video outside today, it dawned upon me that I had forgotten a really important factor regarding the lights that I've been using out there. The speed light which I had originally showed you was the Nikon SP700. The strobe lights that I used were the 8200 Pros. Both of those lights are capable of what's called high-speed sync. And high-speed sync is extremely important for sunlight photography and wide open aperture photography, for apertures of the settings like I was using outside, which were the f2.8. Reason being is because most cameras have a flash sync speed of 1/200th of a second, meaning that's as fast as you can get the shutter to go before the flash can't keep up. And it's a really interesting thing that happens with that. And the way the shutters in the camera works is there are 2 portions of the shutter. And what will happen is, if let's say my chest is the sensor, what will happen is both curtains will be up top here like this. The bottom one will drop out and clear the sensor, leaving the sensor open, and then the top one will shut down after that. That is what happens when you're shooting less than 1/200th of a second. At 1/200th of a second, some cameras can go to 1/250th of a second. What happens after that is the shutter begins to fall, the first curtain falls, the second one begins to fall at the same time. And it leaves only a small slit open in the center of the sensor. And what happens is, while that first and second curtains are falling, the flash goes off. So that portion of the sensor that's open at that time gets the proper exposure. The rest of the picture does not. It comes out jet black. So what high-speed sync does with those lights, especially when I'm shooting at very high speeds, such as I was shooting today, which I kind of forget offhand, I believe my initial shot was about 1/1200th of a second, if I remember correctly. What that does is the high-speed sync of those flashes, instead of firing just one quick burst as those curtains are leaving that sensor open, what happens is the flash duration actually lasts a lot longer. The light stays lit up. What looks to you and I like simply as a strobe, as a flash going off, actually stays open the whole time that first curtain is falling and the second curtain is falling. The light will stay lit the whole time until both curtains close off on the sensor. So high-speed sync is a very important aspect of lights to look for Without that, you cannot shoot at speeds higher than 1/250th of a second. And if you have that aperture open very wide on a bright sunny day, you're going to have just a completely washed out white screen. So shooting in daylight at very wide open apertures requires a high-speed sync light. If you have a regular kit camera budget lens body flash combination with a $40 flash in it, I can guarantee you it's not a high-speed sync light. You're not going to be able to take pictures in bright sunlight with those wide open apertures. If you spend a little bit more money for a speed light, such as I've bought some bargain lights which are $60, $70 for a speed light, which does incorporate high-speed sync, and that is up to 1/8,000th of a second. Obviously the lights that I use for photography, the speed lights are Nikon brand, you're paying for the name, but those are $400 or $500 a piece, and the AD200s are a couple $100s a piece. So all my lights are high-speed sync. That is a very important part of the lights that I'm using. So we'll get back to the action now and show you what the pictures look like as I was using the AD200s to light Allison up. Okay, we're back. What I've done is I've set up two of the Godox AD200 Pro monostrobe lights. In my introductory video, I mentioned how much I love these and how great they were for beach portraits and for really a lot of different types of photography, whether it be commercial photography with products or wedding engagements. In this example, I'm using it simply to describe how they help cancel out the sun. And what you'll notice I've done with Allison is I've moved her away so her back is to the sun. Now, shooting on a beach with the back to the sun is certainly an answer if you want to prevent the squinting, but now you have to remember you have a very harsh lighting situation where the people's faces are going to be completely in the shadows. In another video I'm going to be discussing things about your exposure mode, on how to set your exposure, and most particularly the differences between an evaluative exposure mode in Canon talk, matrix in Nikon, which what that'll do is it'll judge the whole frame of the picture and give an average sort of exposure for the entire picture. I have mine set up right now to what's called center weighted metering, which means that wherever the center of my sensor is or my focal point is, it's going to give the priority to that exposure itself. So obviously I'm going to put that on Allison's face when I expose this and get a metering on that, and that should give me a proper exposure on her face. There's other exposure modes as well, which I'll get into in a different video. So what I've done is I've set up those lights, and those are TTL also, so meaning they're going to fire off two quick shots, one of which being a metering sample, and the second one being the actual synchronization with the shutter going off in the camera. So I have the transmitter on my camera right now for those two lights. I've already tested it, they work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up nice and close with Allison. We're going to take a general picture like we did before and see what it looks like. So the picture you're looking at right now is the picture I just took, and that is zoomed all the way out to 70 millimeter, and I may not have that blown out background that I was looking for, and what this lens is really good for. To get that, what I need to do is to back up and zoom in. So you'll remember from the first part of this video, when I backed up, I lost the ability to hit her with the flash because of the fact that the flash was with me. It walked further back away from her and lost its effectiveness for taking the picture. As you can see with the stands and the light stands, they haven't moved. So my light is going to be exactly the same. My position's going to change and my settings in the camera are going to change, but the amount of light's going to be the same. So let's take a picture from here and see what that looks like. You ready, sweetie?
Yeah.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let's take one more for good luck. 1, 2. So what you'll see in the picture I just took now is I've moved back quite a bit further. I noticed while I was taking it that I wasn't getting the blown out background like I like, and that's only because of the fact that the bush behind her is directly behind her, and in order to separate my subject out a little bit, normally I'd notice that during a shoot and I'd reposition her and put her further up into the yard up here and put that bush further back in order to get just sort of a blown out background. But I don't think I need to go through with that. I think you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to do here. So what this is going to show is the effects of the different types of lights you can use. Doing a beach portrait with just the speed light is very good if you're using a close-up lens, meaning something that you can walk right up to your subjects with, but know that you're probably not going to get that blown out background. You're not going to get a really good shallow depth of field and have your subjects, your customers, really jump out from the picture frame and have that beautiful seascape behind them, which is just sort of blurred out and sort of a fantasy scape. So the addition of those two lights that you see over there are very compact. They're very manageable to work with. It only took me just a minute or two to set them up. I have shoot-through umbrellas, which I will normally use. On these on the beach, you might say, well, you know, it gets windy, they might get blown over. I have spikes, sand spikes that screw down into the sand, and a bungee cord which will hold those stands down, and it could blow all at once and they're not going to get knocked over. So as mentioned in the introductory video, these AD200 Pros were the answer to my remote lighting situation, not only for beaches but for a multitude of different shoots. And as I haven't mentioned yet, is that these lights will accept all sorts of Bowens mount, S-mount, soft boxes and accessories, as well as they have some specific ones just for these lights. But so I can fit any of the industry soft boxes or light modifiers on these, and they still put out that 200 watt second, which is, as you can see from the pictures we just took, even in bright, you know, unmitigated sunlight, they certainly work their magic. In fact, I was at TTL and that particular was at plus 0.3, so I was a third of a step up from its natural. So they may look a little brighter than I kind of want, but just for the example of what we're doing here, I wasn't all that concerned. So some beach photography tips, how to do it right and how to avoid doing it wrong. So stick with me, I'll be making more videos and we'll talk about other techniques to make those portraits look fantastic. Take care.